Boy, that's Roanoke for you. I'm Matt Broughton. So glad to see you. Attorney with Gentry Lock Break some more. And we're here to chat with you a little bit tonight with Dr. Haddon to hopefully help all of us get a little more healthier and happier. So if you can hang in there with us for a while, it's going to be about an hour presentation with Dr. Haddon. And at the end of that, we're going to have a question and answer, which we'll talk to you about in a couple seconds, about how to participate in that. But it should be real interesting. So if you have smartphones and those sorts of things, or if you choose to use paper, you can do that as well. But you'll be able to ask questions during this and have those sent up. And some doctors, which I'll tell you about in a second, will be introducing those. Okay, so Dr. Haddon happens to be my doctor. I went to Mayo Clinic to do their executive physical thing because I'd heard such wonderful things about that. If you've been there, you know what I'm talking about. I had one doctor who was 10 minutes late for an appointment, a cardiologist, and that person apologized for being late. I was amazed. It was so impressive. I'd heard so many good things, and I have to tell you, they were all so accurate. It was an incredible place. You could tell they really cared about you. It was like being in Roanoke. We Roanokers care about people. They care about you there. And our doctors here care about you. They really care about you. So the Mayo Clinic works very closely with our doctors. Dr. Paul Verino is my doctor here, and they work very closely with them. So it's a really nice collaboration that they have going back and forth. But Dr. Haddon is a really interesting man. Not only is he a physician, but he's also been involved in the space program, being the physician to the space program. So he's traveled all over the world, working with astronauts and doing some really interesting things with them. So it's been really fun for me to get to know him more over the last couple of days since he's been here. He has a couple of children, and they've traveled to places like Lebanon and participated in talks like this, and he's just an amazing human being. He's very, very interested in leaving you tonight with some information about what you think will help you feel better and live a better life. So that's really going to be his biggest message. He is still in the United States Air Force. He's a reserve there. He's actually, I think, a colonel in the United States Air Force. And he's just an incredible human being, which you're going to have a lot of fun meeting him. We also have Dr. Spencer, our own orthopedic surgeon everybody knows. He's going to be up on the stage tonight, too, in the question and answer period, as well as Dr. Henshaw, a rheumatologist, and also Dr. Paul Verino, a family medicine physician. And what's going to happen at that point is they will be up here on the stage, and Mary Ann will then be taking questions from you if you care to send them up. And you can send them to that email address if you'd like to. If you have your smartphone there, please turn off the sound on your phone. But otherwise, you go to send up messages or write a note. Those notes we can give to the ladies who have been delaying here, and then they will give them to us, and then we will ask them if you want them asked. Okay? So without anything else, please help me welcome Dr. Haddon to the Roanoke Valley.
Thank you. I've traveled far and I've brought you some gifts. Before I talk about the gifts that I brought you, I want to thank you for the great big gift that you gave me. I am delighted, I am flattered that so many of you came out and wanted to hear what I had to say. And you've been giving me this gift for the past few months while I've been thinking about what I was going to tell you to answer this question of what to do. So you helped me raise my game, and you helped me get smarter at my own profession. So for that, I thank you. Now, I drove from Rochester, Minnesota. I planned to do this. It took me a couple of days. I saw some pretty things, some interesting things. I like driving if I have enough time, and noticed that this was planned. I set it up in advance so it wouldn't be too stressful, so that a few days ago when we had a big snowstorm and it was shutting down the East Coast, I wasn't worried about it. Okay, this is part of the sort of thing I'm going to be talking to you about. But gifts, what did I bring you? So I asked myself, what do I really want in my Christmas stocking? And I want money and power and time. So that's what I brought you. No, really. I mean, money, power, and time, those are pretty good gifts. And I was traveling far, and when you travel far, I mean, I used to help people pack their luggage for launching into space. I never really did that. And you're always constrained by how much weight and how much volume and how much power it takes up, electric power that time. So when you travel far, it's really got to be kind of light. So what I brought you weighs nothing, but is extremely valuable. So we're just going to take these three things, money, power, and time, and for the next hour, I'm just going to put them out in the room, and I want you to see how you can grasp them and use them the way I'm going to talk about. And I'm perfectly serious about all this. So here we go. Here are the gifts. They're out in the room. So let's talk about this a little bit. Money. It's in the bag. This is a regulation helmet bag. Normally it holds a helmet, and that is something that protects you in a flight environment. I took the helmet out. But the idea of protection, I think, is valuable also because it's money. It's a green bag. And what I put in this bag, I put 5 things in here that are that cost me about $200. Anybody can get them. And if you use them right, and you use them seriously, it would probably save you about maybe $1 million over the course of 4 or 5 decades, okay? And later on, I'm going to open up the bag. This is basically, some of you have maybe heard about bug-out bags where people try to think about what they need in a real crisis, and they're leaving town in a disaster, so they put things in their bag like food and water and pocket knives and their bowling ball and things like that. And so this is the bug-out bag for a healthy old age. And I thought about it, and the things I put in here are going to save you money on medications and possibly on operations and give you opportunities that other people might spend money to have. So that's what I mean by money. Okay. And notice that the fire extinguisher is not in the bag, and I'm going to come back to that. I'm a big fan of fire extinguishers. I know all kinds of things to use them. I know about them on the space station. Sandra Bullock used one in the movie Gravity. We can talk about that if you like. That was cool. But the fire extinguisher is not in the bag because, all things considered, I'd rather you not be in the position where you had to use a fire extinguisher. Okay? We're talking about advanced planning prevention. So, power. How can I give you power if I don't really have any myself? Okay, so what kind of power are we talking about? We're talking about the power of example, the power of walking the talk, the power of nurturing others, and also the power of taking care of yourself. And also the power of helping your country by being a stronger thread in that woven fabric that is all of us together. That kind of power. And I think we can work on that. The last thing that I tossed out into the room is time. The United States added 33 years of life expectancy to our life expectancy in the last 100 years. In 1900, our life expectancy was 46, and most of the things that people died of were infectious diseases. Okay? We have made enormous strides. I am an inveterate optimist because I read history and I know how far we've come. One of the things I studied was infectious disease, and I am always amazed at how much better we have made things in that regard. Okay? Whether it's civil engineering, plumbing, vaccinations, antibiotics, it's all there. But I'll tell you, folks, just because you won the last battle doesn't mean you get to take your soldiers off the walls. Okay? We'll talk more about vaccinations later, but the old enemies are still out there. We still have to keep our guard up. So, I'll show slides later about world life expectancy and ours, and we've done very well. Our life expectancy in this country at birth is 79 years, okay? The Japanese are up to about 83 or 84. We've done well, but we still rank number 45 in the world. And I walk around and I don't see people wearing t-shirts that say, we're number 45. Okay? We are number 1 on healthcare spending, and that's not new. We've been doing that for a very long time. We are high maintenance. And I would submit that if we want to add a few years of life expectancy, and not just life expectancy, but add a few years, more years of good life, good functional life, we need to be looking at it in slightly different ways than just spending more money, because for a very long time, decades, we have been spending more money than anybody else. Okay, so this is what I would propose to you. I am told that I've got 600 people here. And if we all together work on, in the next hour, what I'm talking about, basic stuff, we can add 1 or 2 years of life expectancy to the average 40-year-old, okay? So if I've got 600 people and I add 2 years of life expectancy, I have just added, helped grow in the Roanoke Valley 1,200 person years of extra life experience. And speaking as a doctor, if I can, with your help, in 1 hour here, and with your continued help over the next several decades, achieve a savings of 1,200 person years, that's pretty good doctoring for 1 hour's work. And this is the thing about prevention and public health. If you get it right, the leverage is enormous. And we know this because, don't take my word for it, go look it up. People died, in childhood and early adulthood. We added 33 years of life expectancy the last century. We can build on that success. Okay. I wanted to express to you what I think the Mayo Clinic means in terms of its role and how it functions. I've been working there for about 1.5 years. I'm delighted to be there. The Mayo Clinic has some remarkable people developing remarkable technologies and skills. Absolutely no question about it. It also has a corporate culture that is very oriented to hearing what you have to say, talking to you, finding the basic stuff as well. And I was thinking about how to express this, and I was reminded of a professional, world-class pool player I once saw give a demonstration a long time ago when I was in college. He was a older fellow with white hair. He'd been playing pool professionally for years, and he did what you expect a world champion pool player to do. He came in and he dazzled us with magic tricks with pool balls. He could do things with pool balls consistently that seemed unbelievable, and he had probably practiced them thousands of times, making balls jump over each other and go into the holes and stuff. And then he said to us, okay, now this is not how I play pool. I'm going to show you how I play pool. And he racked up the balls and he started sinking them, and shot after shot after shot, he sank about 100 balls in a row. And the funny thing is that they all looked like perfectly normal, boring pool shots, except that he never missed. And he explained to us that what he was doing, and some of you who are decent pool players would probably know this already, you know where I'm going with this, is that he knew where the cue ball was going to wind up after it sank the shot. He left himself a good lie, except that he was doing it about 2 or 3 shots in advance, so he never got himself into a situation where he needed to use the fancy shots, because he was doing the steady, safe, routine shots consistently and planning ahead. And to me, this is what the Mayo Clinic is. We've got people there who have got their special fancy trick shots and expertise on all kinds of unusual illnesses, but you've also got a steadiness there and interest there. Because so much of medicine isn't the stuff that's almost magical, it's getting the basics right consistently. I've got my own special stuff. 1/4 of the time I work in hyperbarics. I'm involved in helping diabetic wounds heal. We help people who have maybe lost a foot and the amputation isn't going so well when we're trying to save their knee. So we use pressurized oxygen in a chamber that's very specialized. If tonight I seem a little bit passionate or maybe a little bit intense, it's because every day, every month, I live in a world where I'm seeing the outcomes that the rest of you may not see so much, okay? So you'll hear me talking about, warning you about sliding off the roof, because you can kind of slide off the roof slowly for 40 years, and you don't really know until you hit the gutter, and then it's an emergency, okay? I am always at the gutter. I'm always catching people going off the edge, all right? So that's where I live. And I joke around with my colleagues that all I really need in my medical bag is a time machine and a megaphone. I want to go back in time and say, stop that. So, with your permission, please think of me as like somebody from one of those movies, and I love movies with time travel, and people go back, and always the thing is, somehow they get the guy back in time, but then he goes back in time and he talks to himself and he never believes himself. Okay, that's the challenge, is going back in time and getting people to understand. So think of this as a way of me coming back and talking to you from some kind of future, all right, if that helps. Okay. Before I worked at Mayo, I worked in the space program. This is an aerial view, it's a space view of Europe. You can see Italy going off right there. You've got Tuscany. That's probably Munich right there, the Adriatic going off there. Beautiful shot. A man I am proud to call my friend, Mike Fossum, took that on Expedition 29. These rules up here on the screen are the very basic things that you could walk out of here right now and it would help you, okay? If you get a symptom, if something hurts, if you get a new lump, get it checked out right away. Okay, there are lots of things we can't screen for, but if you catch them early, they don't spread. For those things that we can screen for them, okay? We know that we can't catch everything, and we know that there are trade-offs between false positives and false negatives and so forth in screening, but we are doing our best. Talk with your doctor about what screening tests work, because one of the things we do at Mayo is we look at the guidelines, but then we see how those guidelines make sense in terms of the individual. Okay, that's another thing I like about Mayo. Prevent where you can. Take care of yourself. Do things that make sense. And this is why I say think in the long term daily. And this is very hard to do, all right? Because we're always getting through the moment, getting through the day, balancing the short-term needs with the long-term trade-offs. I'm always looking way out there into the future, but it's important to do. So for example, I weigh myself every day, right there in the bathroom. And it generally says the same thing. Why am I doing that? Well, kind of for the same reason that when I get out of my car, I turn around and I look at my car. I train myself to do that because maybe the tires are flat or there's a dent in it or something like that. But if you just make it a habit, it becomes no big deal. This is what I mean by think for the long term daily. Another thing that's related is to understand the force of small repetitions, for good or for ill, right? My house is on a cul-de-sac. Why? Because I know I'm going to back out of the driveway 1,000 times, 5,000 times, okay? And the traffic is better there, so the safety is there. I don't put sugar in my coffee. I stopped about 10 years ago because that was just something that was going to repeat over and over again. Another thing I want you to think about is to know how the world changed. We are a success story. I am very proud of the things we have learned. I told you I'm an optimist, okay? How many people here, let me see a show of hands, have a trash compactor in their kitchen? Anybody got a trash compactor? A few, okay. I remember when they came out. It was the 1970s. I was a kid. And my friend and I, we used to take bottles and put them in his family's trash compactor because they go, boom! This may be why trash compactors aren't popular. But here's the point. It was a new technology, and we tried it, and it didn't really catch on, unless you have a specific usage for it, okay? New technologies sometimes come with problems that settle out over time, okay? The world changed, and we are always dealing with the ripple effects of that, okay? I worked in the space program, I like technology, but I understand that it has effects that, again, you have to learn how to deal with. And a lot of our experience with our food supply and how, the sorts of things we eat and the way we sit in chairs. I sit in a chair a lot. I sit in a chair in front of a computer screen. This is not quite what my body is configured for, and I think about me being optimally configured for some kind of outdoor environment, okay, where I'm doing a lot more moving. And so when my hip starts to hurt because I'm sitting in my chair, I say, okay, this is a mismatch. I'm not configured for this environment. It's a starting point. Doesn't mean I have to go out and work in the woods, but it does mean that maybe I should get one of those stand-up desks or something like that. Related, judge tools by how they serve you, okay? If I can't sleep because I've gotten in the habit of checking what the Shanghai stock market is doing right before I go to bed, not that I should really care about that, and I'm getting this big slug of light in my eyes that's disrupting my sleep cycle, maybe that tool isn't serving me perfectly well, and I need to understand that. Work hard at simple things. A lot of this is very basic, but it's hard. I'm going to tell you things that aren't, I mean, I've got a degree in biochemistry, but I don't talk like a biochemist because I'm doing things that are more basic than that are easier than that mentally, but hard to do because they require focus and a steady pace. This is the International Space Station. It has been manned continuously for more than 5,000 days. Right now, there are 2 Americans on board, along with 3 Russians and 1 Italian. I like this slide because the space shuttle is docked right there, and the space shuttle has its robot arm, and there's a camera on the end of that robot arm. What the space shuttle is doing is they are performing an inspection, a screening test, if you will. They're looking for tile damage to see if they can get safely back. Now, if they found tile damage, they would either repair it, if small, or shelter in the space station for a rescue vehicle, if large. So they're doing a screening test, and they know what they're going to do with the information. And I would caution you, when you're doing a screening test, don't go fishing, and we'll talk about that some more, unless you know what you're going to do, right? Inside the space station, you're going to see somebody like this. This is Mike Fossum. I was his flight surgeon for 2 years, including the 167 days he spent on orbit. He's from Texas. He's the first Aggie in space. I'm proud to call him my friend. He's a very likable guy. He's a great guy. And I want to ask the question, how are we all like an astronaut? And we are like an astronaut in a lot of ways. You and I and he are concerned with bone loss and muscle loss. Okay? We have to exercise and counter that. We all have time management conflicts. They especially. We all have demands on our time. We have stress. We have disturbed sleep. It's very noisy on the space station because of the fans. You have to think about community balance. They have to be in touch with their families and their community, and you know, so do you. Okay? There are people right here on Earth in this state who are more isolated than people on the space station. Okay? The astronauts have a high risk of trauma, and in this country, between the ages of 1 and 44, the greatest risk of death is still trauma, injury. They've also got the usual concerns. Astronauts are frequently middle-aged. We treat them for high cholesterol and hypertension, make sure they're safe. But again, the fundamental thing is that the astronauts have a terrestrial body that's configured for one set of circumstances, and we put them into an environment that is not natural for them. And to some extent, we do that to ourselves as well. How are you different from an astronaut? Again, this is Mike. I'm the guy on the right. These are very high performance people. Mike's a flight test engineer. They've got PhDs. They can bench press 200 pounds. They've flown in combat. They are highly talented, very tenacious, and they're adept at long-term planning. They're very good at taking care of their long-term health. Other differences. When they're in space, unlike us, they don't have rapid access to a hospital. They can't call 911, call an ambulance. They do have medical facilities on board. We train them in their use. We know what we would do if they had to emergently evacuate. You can land a Soyuz in several different places. But because they can't get quickly to a hospital, we place a lot of emphasis on screening. And it is an axiom in epidemiology that if you screen healthy people, you're going to get some false positives. So sometimes we worry too much about the astronauts because maybe we see a blip on their test, and we then have to do more tests with more doctors at greater expense just to sort it out. So I want to talk about what makes a good screening test. Screening is carried out in the belief that the detection of disease in an early or asymptomatic stage will lead to appropriate treatment, which in turn will lead to less disability and or mortality from the disease. So screening tests tend to be simple, rapid, and inexpensive. Okay? They're less accurate than the formal diagnostics which follow. I lived on the Texas coast. I was in 2 hurricanes. And the decision-making that comes with hurricanes and evacuation is actually a lot like the decision-making in screening. So this is a very pretty picture. This is the history of Hurricane Rita. A couple of things. This number here is in millions. Price tag for Rita, $12 billion. But it wasn't the most expensive hurricane, but it was the most expensive evacuation. This other number over here, the hurricane killed 7 people. Now, when this thing was rolling in, I was literally moving into my apartment. My family was still in Ohio, and I was just starting my new job 3 days before it rolled in. They gave me a piece of plastic, covered on my computer, and sent me home. I said, wow, this is a fun place to work. Now, the thing here is that Rita was a Category 3 when it was coming in. Its peak velocity was 180 miles an hour with gusts of 235 miles an hour. And 18 hours before landfall, it was going to bullseye Houston 29 days after Katrina. So Houston, this is what it looked like coming in. Houston did this. And I was in this, okay? The evacuation killed 100 people, including 23 nursing home residents who burned to death in a bus that they didn't have to be on. The witnesses heard the oxygen tanks exploding. Couldn't get them out. You make the wrong decision and you can get hurt. The biopsy can cause a bacterial infection of the bloodstream, for example. We expose people to radiation, small amounts fortunately, when we do testing. But these are hard decisions. So when you are looking at something expressing probabilities, you really want to get it right, because otherwise you get a situation like this, where the hurricane kills fewer people than the evacuation. So I moved to Houston, and my family, my wife and kids were coming down, and we wanted to buy a house, and I had just gone through the Rita evacuation. And I said to her, we can't evacuate. It's too dangerous. And if there's a miss, then you've bought the risk of evacuation, and you buy that risk even without experiencing the hurricane. Now, my wife is Lebanese. She grew up in a war. She spent 10 years in the civil war in Beirut proper. She knows all about evacuation. She is perhaps the ideal person to be thinking about this kind of thing with. So we said, if I move too far inland, I'm going to commute, my commute's too long, and I'm going to die in a car crash. If I move too close to the Johnson Space Center, every 5 or 10 years, we're going to get destroyed by a hurricane. So it's drowning versus car crash. So 2 things. And this is literally what we thought about. And we were trying to find the sweet spot of risk where the risk wasn't zero, but it was at what a mathematician would call a local minimum. Okay, so two things here. Number one is we were considering different hazards by the same balance. So dying in a car crash, we can equate it to dying by drowning, right? Number two is we were balancing these and we were talking about it, and we came up with a solution which was 20 feet up, 3 miles inland, and I cut plywood for the house. I spent 2 summers doing that, so we were ready, and then we planned never to evacuate. And I went to work, Johnson Space Center, as a flight surgeon. So what do? We work on console and mission control with the earpiece, monitoring the astronauts on the space station, helping them out. We visit in the mission control in Moscow, in Korolev, the Russian mission control. And if you look at the screens behind me, you'll see that, Toto, we're not in Houston anymore. We work underwater in the neutral buoyancy lab. That's me, about 20 feet down with a space station mock-up next to me. The astronauts train in that. We try to understand their training environment. We work underwater. We work in the desert. I took that picture. I was the second guy through the hatch, about 5 minutes after I took that picture. We study space shuttle systems. We study Soyuz systems. I have to tell you this about gravity. Who all saw Gravity? Let me see a show of hands. George Clooney did not have to let go. Major plot development, the physics was wrong. We attend to the crew at landings. This is in Kazakhstan. This is Mike Fossum's landing. I was there, came in on a helicopter in the snow. We avoid fast food in any language. Now, can everybody find the Happy Meal? The Happy Meal. There's the Happy Meal. Desserty. There's the Coffee Deluxe. Coffee Deluxe. Sampling exotic cuisines. And we never smoke, especially not between the fuel tanks in the back of a Russian helicopter. See, these are inside, I think, because it protects them from bullets and ground fire, but if there's a hard landing, you're up to your ankles in fuel almost instantly. And it made me think a lot about risk, because at the end of the day, my job as a flight surgeon was to try to understand and to optimize risk. So this is Greg Chamatov, another friend of mine. I was his deputy crew surgeon. He flew on a space shuttle. He's an American astronaut. And he's got a picture there of my family at the beach on his computer, because this is a little thing we do. It's fun. We send up a picture, they put it on the screen, so we feel like we've been in space. Well, that is nice. Greg's got a family too, and one of my duties was to make sure that they were covered in emergencies. Anybody got into trouble, needed help. So one day, Greg looked out his window and he saw this. Greg took this picture, Hurricane Ike over the Caribbean. It's another monster coming in, and his family's going to be underneath that. Think about how he feels. He's up in a tin can in space and his family's down there. So we did our job. We worked the plan, and again, here we keep coming back to advanced planning. They had a plan to evacuate well ahead of it. They got out to Oklahoma, so he didn't have to worry. Now, here's the data graphic for Ike. And remember that this is after the fact. So, numbers, $29 billion. Deaths, 103, and this time it was the hurricane, right? The track, almost identical to Rita. Right up, except this one came in. So when you're on the ground in front of one of these things, you don't have that nice future prediction. What you get is something that looks a lot like a screening test. Okay, this is called a risk cone. This is 4 days before landfall. The hurricane is right here. Okay, here is the estimated midline probability track, and this band across here, white line to white line, is only 2/3 of the probability of where it's going to be. So in other words, it could be here, it could be here, it could be over here somewhere, because 1/3 of the probability is outside the cone, and you have to make a decision. And the essence of screening tests is that you're dealing with probabilities, but at some point you have to do something or not do something, right? It's intrinsically imperfect. The midline is drifting north. Houston, by the way, is that notch right there, okay? So it was coming in south of us, but the worst spot is just to the right of the track. The worst surge will occur just to the north of the track. Chamtow family gets away. They're talking about maybe a 30-foot surge. I'm 20 feet up. My wife and I are planning to lose the first floor and the roof. We were ready for that. We had lots of time to plan. Our zip code was ordered to evacuate, but we were on the uphill edge of it, and we thought we were okay, and we understood, having seen the Reed evacuation, that the cars are dangerous too. Johnson Space Center closes. The neighbors all leave. Big Coast Guard helicopters, the big orange ones, are flying out to the east, out to the oil rigs, helping people out. And the Coast Guard helicopters, they go out right over our heads, because we live right next to Ellington Field. And they didn't come back. Okay, that's when we really started to get interested. We had broken out the plywood the day before. This is what Mission Control looked like when it was closed on the inside. It's my desk. So who's this kid? This is my daughter, one of them. This is Emily, in front of the plywood. Now the plywood is configured in a compression rack, so it's ready to be broken out in 15 minutes, and it's been sitting there for 2 years ready to go. Okay? Now look at her face. She's not scared. She is engaged with the challenge. She is informed. She knows that we're working to keep the windows from getting blown in. We might lose the roof. She's adaptable. She's not afraid because nobody told her to be afraid, and nobody acted afraid around her for her to cue off of that, okay? She has a purpose. She knows what she's going to do, and she knows why she's going to do about it. So this is what I call the hurricane rules. And thinking about start with your kids. Thinking about your health is like the hurricane rules. Be engaged, know what the challenges are, be informed, get good information about it. Be adaptable. If you need to change, and I'm going to ask you to consider doing some things that I do, be adaptable. Do not borrow fear. Especially do not borrow anger. I was watching fistfights break out at the gas station on my way home from my last shift at Johnson Space Center. So I didn't need that. So don't borrow anger. And have a proportionate purpose. Now I could talk for a couple of hours about what I call proportionate purpose, and basically it's this. You have a big picture, you believe in something larger than yourself that you work for, but you're small, and sometimes your opportunities are big and sometimes they are small. So proportionate purpose is like a zoom lens, where whatever you're doing, whether I'm taking care of a wound on a foot or whether I'm talking to 600 people, I am helping a purpose in a way that is on a scale that I can engage with because I'm small. That's what I mean by proportionate purpose. The hurricane rules, there they are. It's a good list. This was the neighborhood at the Bolivar Peninsula, north of Galveston. It took a 17-foot surge. That's where most of the deaths happened. We were uphill. We did okay. Lost power for 6 days. There's the plywood. Anyone wants to know how you do that with an arch and plywood all by yourself? I can tell you. I had 2 years to think about it ahead of time. But it wasn't about the plywood. It was about the planning, it was the communication, it was my wife and I and the kids understanding what we were going to do, okay? Because the other thing about this, it's like heart disease. Do you want to be in this conversation? If the cardiologist is saying, I can give you a medication to save your heart, but it might make you bleed in your stomach, is that a conversation that you really want to be having if you could prevent it ahead of time, all right? So how do we draw lessons about medical screening from Hurricane Ike? Risk doesn't go to zero, but you can optimize it. If you wait to be certain, it might be too late. All decisions have a potential cost. And the best decision might be made before you really have as much information as you want to. You can reduce the risk by advanced planning. I ultimately moved to Rochester, Minnesota. That took my hurricane risk to 0. But I got tornado risk. The Mayo Clinic was born as the consequence of a tornado in 1883 that wiped out the town. All decisions have consequences. Pick the ones that you like best. Right? Do you have to be here facing these choices? I put that one in yellow because that's important for advanced planning. Car crashes versus drowning. Okay? People underestimate car crashes because they're used to cars. They tend to exaggerate the risk of drowning. People said, boy, you're kind of crazy to stay in your house in front of a hurricane. I said, no, actually we're pretty safe. It's, the evacuation that scared us. And you can escalate your response slowly, which means that you don't necessarily have to commit. So you have a mammogram, they see something suspicious, they don't go right to a biopsy, maybe they take another picture. Okay? What makes a good screening test? The disease is common. Okay? We're not going to screen this room for smallpox because it's not common. Okay? The disease is harmful, it's worth testing for. The test is not harmful. Okay? There's a therapy for it. You don't screen for things that you can't treat. I mean, unless you want to know just for your own planning purposes. There's got to be an advantage to treating early. The test is acceptable. So I had my colonoscopy 3 months ago because I'm 50. And I'm not going to tell somebody else to get a colonoscopy if I'm not willing to do it myself. Okay? But in Africa, in Ebola, Ebola screening, their blood tests are not acceptable to some people, so they're working on cheek swabs, that sort of thing. It's got to be suitable for use, cheap, and then you got to know what you're going to do with the results before you do it. So no fishing. Don't go fishing. Don't just climb into a CT scanner and find all the little bumps and nodules that we all have inside of us that look scary, because then somebody's going to come along and poke a needle in them. Why? Because the moment you see it, it kind of owns you. So this slide is interesting. This is from the New England Journal of Medicine. It is about screening for thyroid disease in Korea, right? Ultrasounds get better. They find thyroid nodules that are smaller. They actually are cancer, but of a form of cancer that's very slow. So what they find is that they find more cancer, the incidence is going up, and it's not because they had a big nuclear accident or something affecting thyroid, it's because they're just finding it more, they're taking it out, but notice what's happening to the thyroid cancer mortality. The mortality isn't changing at all over time, it's actually going up a little bit because people's heart disease is getting better and they're living longer to die of the thyroid cancer. So this is an example of overscreening in Korea. I said before we've been successful. The American life expectancy is now at 79.7. I'm very, very proud of what we have done. What's next? What did we die of in 1900? Go down to number 10. Number 10 is diphtheria. 2% of the population. Okay? Most of these kids, babies. 1 person in 40 died of diphtheria, choking to death. Right? It's still out there. Why we vaccinate. The top 2 killers, 1 person in 5 died of influenza, pneumonia, or tuberculosis. Tuberculosis we learned to treat, and we also screened for it. Pneumonia, without antibiotics, kills 1 person in 5. The roll of the dice. Influenza, dangerous disease. Influenza kills 20, 30,000 Americans a year. Mostly older, mostly sicker, which is a good reason to try to protect your heart and your lungs. So even if the vaccination doesn't work as well 1 year, and sometimes the vaccination is better than others, you have reserves of protection, you have resiliency. But the point here is that so much of this is infectious, and the cancers and the heart disease are farther down the list. Now, just look at the top 2, heart disease and cancer. Those are the big 2. And I would submit to you that this is a success story because these deaths are happening much later, okay? And it's simply the next problem to solve, and that's the way it works. You hit the alligator that's closest to the canoe with your paddle, and then you hit the next one. And we didn't have these problems before we got good at solving the previous problems. And this is what I want to say about things like problems with our food supply and weight and diabetes, is that we are just learning how to grapple with this because it's kind of new to us. Tuberculosis became a problem when we started growing big cities, and it took us about 300 years to figure it out. We've been working on the obesity problem for about 40 years. We're going to get it figured out, but it's part of a process of technological advancement. Here's the numbers. This curve this is age, and this is percent of people surviving from birth. The green line, 1900. Big infant mortality, and then a lot of young people dying on a steady slope downward. Tuberculosis, pneumonia, things like that. With the control of infections in 1950, we get out to this curve, but we have a lot of people smoking, for example, and we're still doing a lot of saturated fat in the diet. Then here, between here, this is now, that's heart disease coming out, all right? So what we're really looking for, people don't really seem to get past 100, 105, 110 until we have some kind of breakthrough. But the basic optimal package here, and what we're trying to do here, is if we can keep solving the things like the diabetes and the cancer and the heart disease, we keep pulling the curve out towards the upper right-hand corner of the box, right? That is what I see as the next big round, the low-hanging fruit of improving American lifespan. I would just want to point out a couple of things about this graphic. This is available from the CDC. You should look it up online. It's what we die of, top 10, 1 through 10, divided by age. Heart disease and cancer are right up there. So, am I worried about breast cancer? Yes, I'm worried about breast cancer. It kills 5% of women. We should screen for it? Yes. Heart disease kills about 8 times more women than breast cancer. We should be screening for all of these. Next thing, trauma, up age 1 to 44, major problem. Next thing, a lot of these problems talk to each other. They interact. So my grandfather chain smoked for 50 years. He had a stroke, a heart attack, COPD, he fell, broke his hip, and he had jaw cancer. Which one of those things killed him? Well, he died of pneumonia. But he also died longer than, he died at age 84, past the average life expectancy. I hope I get his genes. So this is why you have to tailor things to the individual. This is the world population, life expectancy, women's life expectancy on the y-axis, men on the x-axis. So the women live a little bit longer everywhere, even in societies where the infrastructure isn't so good. The outliers here are Russia, Ukraine, and Belarus, where the men are especially doing badly. Okay, that is probably cultural. I spent a year over there. We spend the most, we don't live the longest. It's good news all around the world, though. People are living longer. This is from The Lancet. The developing world, this bar here is where what diseases aren't happening to give them the life expectancy. Developing world is diarrheal illnesses. Up here, this one is us, heart disease. We gained 2-3 years from improved control over heart disease. What do we do with our time? 600 million views of the Gangnam Style video. You can get a coffee mug with this graphic on it. It's from The Economist. And this is just a graphic of what we could do with the time that we spent watching the Gangnam Style video. Written Wikipedia. But seriously, that's okay. I mean, this is a sign of your success. This is a prosperous society that has the time to do things like this. Mayo Clinic recommendations, a few things that I want to call a special attention to. We do mammography annually, and we will look at continuing to do it as long as somebody is healthy. So would we do a mammogram on somebody who's 85 years old? Yeah, if you don't have heart disease and if you're in good shape, certainly. Colorectal cancer, new development. I want you to know about this. We have a DNA test, a DNA stool test for polyps and early cancers. It's called Cologuard. It's non-invasive. It's available now. Okay? It's every 3 years. I had my colonoscopy. 3 years from now, I'm going to get my Cologuard done. You can do it at home. We screen for diabetes early. Breast cancer screening, Basic numbers. You do 1,000 mammograms, we call back 100, we do 12 biopsies, we find 4 cancers. Although it takes a lot of mammograms to save one life, the life you save is saved early, so the person years is fairly substantial per mammogram. Okay? Colonoscopy, it's something like 271 years of life saved for every 1,000 colonoscopies. We do lipid screening starting at age 20. Why? This is why. This is a frightening slide. This is the aorta of a 19-year-old trauma victim. We started seeing things like this in Vietnam, where unfortunately we had access to seeing the pathological changes in the arteries of young men. These are cholesterol streaks. The disease starts early. This is what you need to be telling your teenagers. This is why I don't eat anything that's advertised on a billboard, okay? Because we can't screen for this, you can't see it. This is what gradually develops and leads to atherosclerosis 40 years later. When this slide was taken, I'm the guy on the right, the camel's on the left. I'm a little skinny here. I was on a plant-based diet. My cholesterol was 102. Okay, I can do this, and I would recommend that you experiment a bit with a vegetarian toolbox just to learn what sort of options you have. I was out jogging in the desert outside of Baikonur with Mike Fossum. A lot of the risk factors for heart disease are under our control. If you start early enough, you can cut down your risk. If you start late, you can still cut down your risk. Okay, please do. This is a torn lining of the coronary artery. This is how it happens. The cholesterol produces an inflammatory reaction, and basically the wallpaper peels off the wall, flaps across the vessel, blocks the flow, triggers platelet activation, because platelets, they plug holes. They see a torn wallpaper, they gum up the vessel. We've done well so far. We started to reduce our cardiovascular mortality. But it's mostly lifestyle. We doctors, we do our best. We prescribe medication, but this graph shows that after 3 years, only half the people are taking their medication. Again, it's like the hurricanes. Let's try not to be in the situation where things like the fire extinguisher are necessary. This graph just shows where the benefit is. Most of the benefit is early on before you even get to the doctors. Exercise matters. English postal workers versus English desk workers. Half the heart attacks. The website for the BMI calculator is in your program. This is mine, 22.5. I walk the talk. I weigh myself every day. I'm comfortable at that point, but I've been doing it for years. It's just like it's no big deal. There is an ideal amount of exercise, brisk walking, brisk swimming. You don't have to be a marathon runner. In fact, this graphic shows that serious hardcore marathon runners seem to have more cholesterol plaques, more calcified plaques in their arteries than couch potatoes. Okay? You should exercise, but don't be intimidated by trying to exercise too hard. The first guy who ran the first marathon run in the Greco-Persian Wars died. Okay? So, the message. You come from a different time when we walked a lot, we ate foods that we had to gather, okay? And you're configured for that. We made deals. We learned to farm. We learned to make cheese. That saved us from starving, but now we want to get to 100. So, judge a technology by how it serves you. If it's not serving you so well anymore, you can change it, all right? We harnessed fire, we invented cooking, we burned our hands. We invented oven mitts. We learned to bake, we brought the oven inside, we burned the cookies, so we invented timers and fans, okay? There's always a lag, okay? And you're in the middle of such a lag now. The problem with obesity is that it's new to us. We don't know how to solve it yet. We're beginning to get a sense of that. And I want you to think about this in terms of not just some skinny guy nagging you again, right? But think about it in terms of the world is a little bit out of whack, and that's what we do. We make new problems and we solve them and things get better. But don't be hard on yourself, but understand that you're not configured to sit in a chair or a traffic jam for periods of time, okay? I showed you the hurricane rules. Moderation, you've seen The Princess Bride. This is what I mean by moderation, where you're safe. If your BMI is below 25 and your blood pressure is below 120/80 and your LDL is below 100 and your glucose is below 100 and you're not ingesting or using destructive substances, which might be alcohol or tobacco, but it might also be sugar, or it might be the sleeping medicine that makes you break your ankle. If you're not in that box, treat it as a matter of urgency, okay? So you don't have the urgency later. And if you think this is difficult, try having chronic pain and being on 6 different medications. So what's in the bag that's worth $1 million, okay? Run, walk, play. Most nights I walk the dogs with my wife. It's wonderful. I found one of these. Everybody know what one of these? Some people probably don't. This is a Rolodex. This is your community. The community's in the back. The community is your friends, your connections, your church group, your doctors. I've got a book club, okay? That's your strength. That will protect you, okay? This will save you medications. This is a lunch bag. I drove 1,100 miles and I didn't eat any fast food. My wife packed me some food for the trip. You gotta control your own food. You drink water. The Tupperware holds the leftovers from the dinner you cooked yourself, right? The more you control your own food, the more you can figure out what's working. I weigh myself every day. My wife said, "You're going to put my bathroom scale on the stage?" Well, I've got a table here. I am. And oven mitts. Cooking is one of the great accomplishments of our civilization. And these are symbolic to remind you that we used to burn our hands, we learned how not to do that. Okay? We've changed our world, but we're still the same old people. Okay, so the oven mitts are to remind you that, okay, we have some new problems because we solved all those old problems. Okay, we're going to solve the next one, but I need you to start thinking about how to do it yourself, because I can't do it for you completely as a doctor. I can only coach and I can be an example. And I believe very firmly that in order for me to be credible, I should be walking the walk, and this is what I do. That's the bug out bag for healthy aging. I think it's worth $1 million. This is me in my kitchen, and me in my kitchen, and me in my kitchen. And the challenge is, how do you balance what the people are telling you from the books and what the internet people are telling you with their enthusiasm? You got to make a decision. And these are just some pictures of things that I eat. This is Lebanon. This is Mediterranean cuisine. We do this. This is what I don't eat at a restaurant. I just automatically put it aside. I save myself 400 calories without thinking about it. Okay? If I don't bring my own lunch to work, that's my default. It costs me $4. Notice that the orange juice glass is empty. This is at a hotel. I've got some sausage there. I like sausage. Okay, but it's mostly whole stuff and no sugar. Do not drink liquid sugar. Okay? If you change one thing, look at the list. Don't drink this stuff. It's 25 pounds a year. Fruit is good. Fruit juice can be liquid sugar. So natural is not just what you eat, but it's how you eat it, right? Do the whole foods things. Michael Pollan's Food Rules is an excellent book. I live by it. I recommend it to my patients, okay? And pictures from my garden, all right? I like to think of myself, and I will close with this, as planting seeds. Okay, because I'm a gardener. I hope I've planted a few here, and I'll be delighted to see how they grow. I'll be happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much. So, Dr. Marino will come up, Dr. Spetzler, and Dr. Henshaw, who will be coming up right now. Mary Ann, if you've sent questions up, they'll be considering those questions, and they'll be asking of Dr. Haddon now, and maybe helping answer those. So, do you have a question for us yet?
We have a convention.
I have one.
Dr. Spetzler.
I appreciate your talk. It was very enjoyable.
Thank you.
But when I think about living longer, it's not just living long, it's living well.
Yes, sir.
And I think the Greeks, a long time ago, had it together as body, mind, and spirit. I heard you talk about body and screening, which is stress, and then one last slide. I mean, you can't cover everything in an hour.
I tried.
But talk about mind and spirit as part of living well and longer.
I agree emphatically. how you live, your family, your community, your friends, how you look at the big picture. I was trying to talk about that with proportionate purpose, for example. I think a lot of people who don't have hope, don't see how they fit in, are having problem with that engagement. Okay? What I worry about is that not only are people living shorter, but they're also having pain or apathy when they are doing so. It's not all about the numbers. It's about the connections, and it's about what it means to you. And I've been working and when I left NASA, my wife and I talked a great deal about finding work that would also be meaningful to me, because we knew that this was going to be a big shift. So the meaning is terribly important. Am I responding as you would wish?
Well, it's one of the big medical problems that we're living longer, but we're not able to think. It's a big part of our population. It's got Alzheimer's, and addressing that also in part of your exercise and mindfulness.
And I mean, this is one of the effects of screening is if you don't die of an infectious disease or colon cancer, it's almost as if you were moving it to somewhere else. And on that table of the leading causes of deaths, I believe Alzheimer's was number 7 or number 8, and this can be quite devastating. I think this plays into prevention. And it also speaks to the point that every success that we have, ever since the harnessing of fire, produces a problem, an effect that for some period of time can cause us harm. And the only thing I can say is to recognize those problems and to understand that this is going to be an effect, and to try to engage them and perhaps to try to anticipate them as they arise.
Okay, what's our next question?
Did you see it on the screen? What are the best choices when eating out?
Well, this is why I like the Princess Bride moderation idea. Because once you get yourself into a safe zone, you can do what you want. So I eat steak, but I don't eat hamburger, okay? All that soda I'm not drinking allows me, when Thanksgiving rolls around and we make homemade pies, I get to eat those. So eat things that are mostly plants. When I showed you that slide of what I didn't eat in the restaurant, what I did eat was the grilled walleye. I had the fish with the potato. So don't go out of your way to eat things that are high in saturated fats or sugars and things like that. But if you play a very solid, steady, like a pool player, defense, it allows you more luxuries. But the thing is, most of us were sliding off the roof and we don't know it. So the first thing to do is to get a really good sense with the numbers of where you are, and that allows you to enjoy yourself safely.
Next question, Dr. Henshaw.
What do we have next on the screen? That's a good question. Vaccines are really in the news right now, as you guys are probably hearing. There's a measles epidemic in Southern California, and I'll let Dr. Haddon address that.
So I grew up in Maryland, and I traveled in New England, and I spent a lot of time in Ohio, and these areas, and I think Virginia also has one thing that California doesn't have. We have historical cemeteries. And I spent a lot of time walking around in old cemeteries, and one of the things you'll find is you'll find a lot of kids. They don't have old cemeteries in California. I vaccinate my kids, My girls, by the way, are vaccinated against human papillomavirus, and when the new version comes out that prevents even more kinds of cervical cancer, I'll vaccinate them too. Okay? We vaccinate 35% of our kids against human papillomavirus. It's a vaccine that prevents cancer, folks. So yeah, I feel strongly about that. Now, designing an influenza vaccine, because influenza varies rapidly over time, designing that vaccine is frankly like trying to hunt bats with a shotgun. Sometimes you hit them and sometimes you don't. And the people who are doing it are meaning their best, but in a typical year, according to the CDC, you get about 65% protection with an influenza vaccine. Now, I will take 65% body armor if that's what I got and somebody's shooting at me, okay? But the other effect of that is that even that partial protection dampens the speed of the spread of the disease through the population, okay? And as far as things like tetanus, the bacterium that causes tetanus lives in dirt. It's part of the ecology. It doesn't need us. It's always there. So this is just part of the world. And the old strategy in the Middle Ages was just to keep having kids and hope you have more stay alive than die. I don't like that strategy. I really don't. I mean, we worked hard. Vaccinations are like wearing shoes. Okay, we invented shoes, we invented vaccines. Okay.
We had a couple of more specific vaccination questions.
Yes,
for those middle-aged people who are 50 and older, which I'm in that category now. What do you think about the shingles vaccine, and what about other vaccines that are often given, like measles, mumps, rubella, as for young people? Now, what about in the older group of individuals?
Measles, mumps, rubella, if you're college age, is important. When we give a tetanus shot, when you're an adult, we'll want you to have the Tdap, which is tetanus, diphtheria, and acellular pertussis. Why? Because we adults give pertussis, which is whooping cough, to kids. So if you got kids, or if you're around kids or grandkids, you're doing it for the team to protect your own kids, because we give pertussis to them, and they can die of it. But you should have tetanus. Zoster is interesting. Shingles is very painful. It can cause residual pain, and the peak incidence goes up when you are 60, 70, 80, all right? The vaccine is simply, and shingles is caused by a reactivation of the chicken pox that you've carried around inside your body. It lives in nerve fibers, and it can go dormant for 40, 50 years until it turns on again. The vaccination is a modified chickenpox virus, okay? Now, in the case of shingles, vaccines wear off over time, and the incidence goes up when you're older, so the sweet spot again for a single dose of the shingles vaccine is age 60, which is what insurance will cover. But I had a patient ask me a couple of weeks ago, you know, I'm 55 and I'm worried about shingles because my cousin had it and it hurt his eye. Can I have it? And I said, yeah, you know, you can have it. We give, by the way, astronauts of any age that we send to the space station, we vaccinate them against shingles. Okay, that was one of the jobs I had to do, was to figure out whether we should do that. We should do that, even though they're not 60 yet. Just the thing to bear in mind with that is, if you do get the shingles vaccination when you are younger than 60, it might wear off. You might need to think about doing it again, and you might have to pay for it. Flu, influenza, yeah, absolutely. Okay, I get mine, my kids get it, my wife gets it. It's 23% effective this year. This was a very bad year for it, but you know, you should get it. Other things, pneumonia vaccine. There are two of them. There's basically a starter and then a booster. The pneumonia 13 valent and then the pneumonia 23. Very important. It's life-saving.
Bob Haddon, question.
Yes, sir.
Dr. Haddon, this question, these folks have asked, can you tell us a little bit about MRIs and how effective they are for screening for cancer and non-cancer? But I'd like to expand that a little bit more. You obviously work at a great institution that has truly all the medical tests that are available on this planet today, and you have access to everything. I also assume that your institution focuses on and practices on an evidence-based medicine model, so you only do things that are proven by science to be effective. You don't do things that we think work or we believe work. You do things that are effective because they're proven to be effective. And I bring bring this up because a lot of us here in the community, there's a lot of discussion about, well, should I get an MRI to screen for colon cancer, or should I get a full body CT scan? Should I go off to a clinic and have all these tests done? I would assume at your clinic you do what evidence says is effective, and it would be helpful for us to know in the community here, what is evidence-based medicine saying for these screening tests, for these full-body CTs, full-body MRIs, going off to centers and spending thousands of dollars? How effective are they, and what are some of the complications, and should folks be considering those sorts of things as they get older and look towards their health?
I think that's an excellent question. Let's start with something fairly easy like prostate cancer screening. PSA is a blood test, and it's got a lot of uncertainty in it, and everybody knows that. To save one life from prostate cancer, you need to test something like 1,400 PSA tests. The evidence there is that it works, but you need to do an awful lot of sifting before it does work. When CT scanners were first invented, people started noticing that in people's adrenal glands, they kept finding nodules, adrenal adenomas, and they stuck needles in them to see if they were cancerous, and sometimes people would get, bleeding complications or infectious complications. And it turns out that we've got 600 people in this room, well, 60 of you probably have an adrenal adenoma, and it's minding its own business, and it's not dangerous. And this is the problem with screening tests, is that although some diseases and some cancers have a characteristic appearance, a lot of the time they don't. A lump is a lump, a nodule is a nodule, a shadow of one thing may look like something else. Not everything that grows in the pancreas is fundamentally dangerous, but the pancreas is a very touchy organ to have a needle poked into it. It can cause harm. And remember, I was saying that you need to know what the plan is before you go in. Remember the Korean data where they go in they take out these cancers, but then people get paralyzed vocal cords, or they develop calcium disorders because their parathyroid glands have been damaged. So there are consequences, and the evidence base does not support just scanning everything, because the insides of our bodies are a lot like our faces. They're all kind of the same, but they're all kind of different. Everybody who grew up in the Ohio Valley has histoplasmosis nodules that look a lot like incipient lung cancer. So you have to be very careful about what you go looking for, because you might see something and then you're kind of stuck. And I would ask you to remember the Rita evacuation, where you can have consequences from the things that you do with good intention. So if you were to ask me, I would not myself, and I'm trying to do everything I can to keep healthy and live a long time, okay? The evidence base does not support doing that, and I would not do that on myself. I don't recommend it to my patients. Sir?
In other words, you wouldn't do a body scan.
I wouldn't do a body scan.
Right.
If I had a pain here in a few years ago I had a pain right here, okay? I got it checked out, okay? I had a compelling reason to go looking for it. But the problem is, if you go looking for things, you will find things. And then you are constrained to act again, or compelled to act again. Is that a fair answer?
It's a great answer.
Dr. Spencer, you have a question?
I would add to that every time you do screening, you're going to find abnormalities as we age. And once people are told they have abnormalities, they hang on to them with a tenacity that's unbelievable. Raises the stress level and doesn't improve life. But the question I have, a number of them have asked, what supplements would you recommend as a routine?
All right.
And including vitamins. I had that one too.
Yes, sir. I take vitamin D. My wife takes vitamin D and calcium. My kids take vitamin D. The reason I do that is because I live in Minnesota, I live indoors and I wear clothes, and normally, and remember the world changed. okay? This building thing and this clothing thing is kind of new. And vitamin D we make out of a cholesterol precursor. The sunshine thing is because the sunshine, the ultraviolet light, causes a chemicals conversion, chemical step. And we're finding vitamin D receptors in cardiovascular tissue. We used to think it was just bone. There was a meta-analysis in the British Medical Journal this past year where they looked at cancer incidence, colon cancer, and cardiovascular mortality, and looked at vitamin D levels. And if you have adequate vitamin D levels, and they're still sorting out what adequate is, but we're looking at lowering your cancer risk by about 25% and your cardiovascular risk by about 20%. But I don't take a multivitamin. There have been several meta-analyses of beta-carotene, vitamin A, vitamin C, vitamin E, where either there wasn't any change, or in the case of smokers with beta-carotene, cancer risk actually went up. It seems like cancers like beta-carotene even more than we do. So you got to be careful, and there's a huge industry out there for taking stuff. And basically my own personal view is I don't take pills. I mean, and whether they're supplement pills or medicine pills, unless you can give me a really good reason why. So these days, it's basically vitamin D is the only thing I can think of.
Can I ask a follow-up on that? Just what in traditional medicine have we done that has failed so? Because the educated people that get older, more so than the non-educated, are looking for alternative medicine. They're looking for the nutraceuticals, and they're spending billions of dollars on it. Where have we failed to communicate what we think is good health?
People are smart. We have these brains and we like to think about stuff. It does not necessarily follow that the spinning that we do is wise or scientific. Scientifically, you're trying to build an accurate roadmap of the world. If you ask how we failed, the question I would ask is, was it ours? Is it our job to make all food and health decisions for people? I tell people I don't take a lot of supplements. My mom takes about 15 and she's 82 years old. And because I don't borrow anger, I realize that she's doing fine with what she's doing, and I just don't talk about it a whole lot with her, and whatever she's taking doesn't seem to be hurting her. I don't think it's helping her though. But in that bag, the bag with the money in it, okay. You saw the things that were in the bag, but medications, supplements, chairs, too much computers, those aren't in the bag. I don't think you need to spend a whole lot of money, and if you don't spend the money on that, and you spend it walking the dog with your wife or something, you get more money in the bag. That's the best answer I can come up with.
Mary, do you have another question? Yeah, absolutely. Remember those 3 gifts where I wanted to bring you money, power, and time? I figured there was going to be some kind of legal problem if I talk about bringing that as a gift, but this is a tremendously important question. The first thing is, so I will have a patient, and this is kind of a composite patient, so I'm not giving anything away, but maybe my patient's a guy, he's in his 40s, things are starting to go, he's not a teenager anymore, and he sits on the couch and he watches football players who are obviously much tougher than he is, and he's putting on some weight, he doesn't feel good, and his back hurts, and doesn't sleep well because of the sleep apnea, and he comes to me and says, "Hey doc, can you check my testosterone?" Except he says, "I think I've got low T."
Now, every time I hear the word low T, it kind of reminds me of how they used to end Sesame Street. They would say, Sesame Street has been brought to you today by capital A and low T. Now, what I always do when I have a patient who has a problem or perceives they have a problem is that they've got something, they hurt, they're unhappy, they feel bad. And what I like to do, because the Mayo Clinic gives me time to talk to people, I really like this, is I say, okay, let's back up a little bit. What's going on is you feel bad in all kinds of ways, but you've assigned a value to it, like you've assigned a cause, perhaps prematurely. So let's back up a little bit and see what we can do to help you with the whole package, okay? So we get people walking, we get the BMI down, we get the cardiovascular fitness up, okay? You'll feel better about yourself. You lose the weight, the sleep apnea goes away, you sleep better, you stop so many medications, get fewer medication interactions. We look at stress, which can have a huge effect on sex life, and we kind of tease apart the knot, okay? That all by itself, I think, is very important, okay? Things like Viagra, I think they're helpful, okay? It's part of looking at the whole big picture, all right? If a woman has got vaginal epithelial friability, things hurt, you should see their gynecologist for women's health. There are medications that can help with that, okay? This is important. This is part of not just tacking on a couple of years of life, but tacking, in front of that, having good life. Because not only when people get sick with things like heart disease and diabetes and so forth, what goes along with that is a lot of pain. I mean, my grandfather, with his stroke and his heart attack and his cancer and so forth, I think he was miserable for the last 20 years of his life. That did not have to be the case. About ways to increase, I don't know, as far as ginseng, I would encourage people to try a blinded trial themselves at home, and have your spouse switch them up and see. I mean, I'm never going to tell you that something doesn't work, but I want you to be scientific about it. I don't think it's likely to work. I know Viagra works, okay? I don't know if ginseng works, but if you want to try it, just say, honey, switch the bottles and we'll see. Don't tell me what's happening. Do the science. Healthy ways to increase libido, sleep better, all this, what I talked about before. It's got to be part of the whole package. And all of these things crosstalk with each other, so you can't just fix one problem. I can't look at my prostate and ignore my heart. It's all one big package.
That's all the questions we have.
That's all we got.
Thank you so much, doctors. Dr. Haddon, your friends in Roanoke have put together, with my wife's help, a basket of things made in Virginia and locally to our area. We'd like to present that to you right now.
Oh my goodness.
Thank you all so much for coming tonight. It was really wonderful. Thank you, Dr.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, everybody.